This lecture deals with the sedimentary rocks that are not formed by clastic processes. So what we covered before in the previous two lectures on weathering and then textures of clastic rocks, that's for a huge number of rocks, but there's a lot of other things out there. In particular, we call these things chemical sedimentary rocks. They are formed by a whole suite of different processes, but think back to chemical weathering, where chemical weathering is the dissolving of things. If you take salt, which is sodium chlorine, you dissolve it into free sodium ions and free chlorine ions. Well, if they reform somewhere else, they remake salt, rock salt, again, sodium chlorine, sodium chloride. That is a chemical sedimentary rock. But it also involves a lot of biological processes. So the photo you see here is of a beautiful, living, thriving coral reef. All of those organisms there, the corals, the starfish, even the fishes and things, but all the little ones you can't see, the snails and barnacles and shrimp, they are all making skeletons out of hard parts, just like you and I. And those are biochemical processes. So you and I make a skeleton out of calcium phosphate, and if we die and our bones get deposited in the soil, well, we have added a biochemical class or piece to that soil. So we've got to talk about different processes besides clastics. If we look at the environment diagram, well, these biochemical or just chemical sedimentary rocks, they can occur all over the place as well, but they are principally found or made in the oceans. So look at remember all the different addresses here, and here we've got the organic reef out here. This would be the address of the beautiful picture in the previous slide. A lot of chemical sedimentary rocks mediated by biological processes are made here. That would be very different from the stream environment that we talked about before with clastic rocks. So you go all around the planet and different sedimentary rocks are made in different places. So this slide set goes over several of these that are important for us. So here's an easy one to remember. Coal. Most people know about coal, and coal is a black rock that you know that some people burn for energy formation. Well, it is a biochemical sedimentary rock. Coal is formed in environments like the one you see in the upper right. A swamp, a wetland, that kind of area with lots of moisture, lots of organic matter, principally plant matter, and then sort of a fetid, reducing conditions environment that allows it to get preserved. If those swamps or wetlands exist for long enough and then get covered by sediment and get cooked, then that can make the rock type coal. The lower picture, the lower right picture, is a man standing in a stream bed in a coal seam. You sort of see the black rock that's as high as his body is a coal seam, and then it has brown regular rocks above it. That coal formed over millions of years from an ancient swampy wetland environment. Here's something to think about. The only place where coals can be made are in these warm, organic-rich, wet, swampy environments. But today we can find coals in the dry Sahara Desert. We can find coals in Alaska. We can find coals in Antarctica, places where they couldn't possibly form today, but the fact that we find them there means that those warm, swampy conditions had to have existed there in the past. Remember, uniformitarianism, the present is the key to the past. You find a coal, you're looking at an ancient swamp. Here's another rock type, chert. Chert is a biochemical sed rock, and it is only made in deep ocean basins. It consists of the skeletons of all of these plankton creatures that you see over here on the right side of the screen. These are microscopic skeletons of little plants and animals, things that we call radiolarians and diatoms, silicoflagellates, all that. And when they die in the ocean, their little skeletons rain down by the billions and billions and make oozes on the seafloor, which harden over millennia to become rocks that we call chert. In the lower left, there's a big block of chert. That thing's about as big as a grapefruit. And chert is very important for sort of human history because of the little arrowhead you see right there. Chert is a rock type that can easily be worked and shaped. And so early humans used this to make tools like arrowheads, bird points, axe fronts, scraping tools, etc., etc. So the rock types around here, we have a lot of chert that's deposited. Again, it's more evidence that this part of Wisconsin was once a deep ocean basin. And our Native Americans, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the various tribes that were here, yes, they did. They used the chert and made tools from it. So in that sense, they were using an ancient geologic product filled with fossils. You can't see them. They're microscopic, but using a product made on an ancient ocean floor to develop a product that they used intently in their lives. Chalk. Chalk's another thing. It's another biochemical sedimentary rock. It is made of the skeletons of these things that we call coccoliths. So in the upper middle of the slide, that little soccer ball shaped thing you see there, that's about 1/100th of a millimeter in size. Very, very small. Much smaller than a millimeter. Much smaller than a sand grain. Inside that little thing was a single cell of a beautiful little plant that went and photosynthesized and did all the good stuff that plants do. It has a green color. On the extreme sort of upper right picture here, you see that when they die, all the little sort of shields and parts, they look like little hubcaps and things, break off. They get bunched all together and smashed together. And if that sits there long enough, it hardens and cooks and becomes the rock type that we call chalk. And so the lower right picture is a nice photograph of the beautiful cliffs of Dover in England, but also the Normandy cliffs in France. These are hundreds of feet, sometimes you can have a couple thousand feet of just beds of chalk, made by trillions to the trillionth power of the skeletons of these little coccoliths. These things can be very, very abundant. And these are typical of marine open ocean environments. The picture in the middle, I know it's hard to see, but if you look close, it's a satellite photo of the outline of Alaska. And then the greenish blue area here, that's the Gulf of Alaska. That's where, if you watch that television show Deadliest Catch, where those guys go out and catch those king crabs and lobsters and things for your red lobster meal, that's where this is from. And here the coccoliths are so abundant because there's 24 hours of sun way up there during the summer months. They literally turn the ocean green. There is so much basic, pure productivity, food, for the base of the food chain there, that's what allows these king crabs and these beautiful examples of seafood that a lot of us eat to grow so huge. And if you find ancient examples of it, these cliffs of Normandy, cliffs of Dover, this is again an example of the same environment must have existed at that time. And then there are these things that we call the carbonate rocks. These are chemical or biochemical sed rocks, and they're made of this chemical formulae, CaCO3. It's the calcium carbonate molecule. And they are a mixture of lime mud plus fossil skeletons. And eventually they get all cemented together to become, and I know you've heard this rock type, limestone. In the photograph there, that skin diver She is looking at a bunch of corals and sponges and bryozoans and things. You can see the big skeletons of these creatures here, as well as a whole bunch of smaller skeletons. And then the white stuff is carbonate, CaCO3 mud. When all of these things die, they break apart and their pieces of them get embedded in the mud. But all of this is CaCO3. It all hardens to become beautiful limestone. And limestone is a golden indicator of warm ocean environments. The only way you can describe or produce limestone is in warm ocean environments. You find lots of limestone, you know that an ancient warm ocean was there. Incidentally, the bedrock below our feet here in Wisconsin is almost all, it's hundreds of feet, a couple thousand feet of warm marine environment limestone. Back to the environment things again. You know, these different things can be, these different rock types can be deposited in these different addresses, some more prominent than others. Limestone in the oceans, coals up here in swampy wetlands, that kind of thing. But wherever they're deposited, and whatever rock type they are, sedimentary rocks are deposited in layers or beds. You're looking at a road cut with a highway at the bottom, and you can see the nice layers or lines, sort of flat lines across here. Those are beds of sedimentary rock. You see that, you know you are looking at sedimentary rocks. Even when we send those little Mars rovers, those little machines that are driving around, sampling rocks, taking pictures of Mars for years, they see this. So this is a universal thing. Weathering ultimately becomes lithified rocks, which are laid down in these beds. And these beds can be at many, many different scales. The picture in the upper left, that's the mighty Wasatch Front, several thousand feet of sedimentary rocks, and you can see by the layering of the tree outcrop that there's this sort of angled bedding over here. The lower picture in the lower right is a bunch of students at an outcrop in Utah, and we're looking at beds of sedimentary rock here. If I were to sample any of these rocks and cut it and put it under a microscope, there would be little beds that would be several millimeters thick. If I enlarged it even farther, it'd be even more so. So beds, they exist and they are evidence of sedimentary rock. Then look at the sedimentary rock, identify the rock, and you can start telling environments. You might be standing in a desert today or a frigid wasteland covered with ice. But if you pick up some limestone, an ancient ocean had to be there. If you pick up some coal, an ancient swampy environment had to be there. If you pick up some chert, an ancient, deep, deep, deep ocean deposit with siliceous ooze had to have been there. These are just some of the other sedimentary rocks. There's certainly a lot more.